The old sedan, a faithful but weary companion, swallowed the miles with a rhythmic, almost mournful groan. Inside, the air hung heavy, a stale cocktail of forgotten coffee, the lingering sweetness of cheap gas station candy, and the taut, almost palpable anxiety of its 4 passengers. Liam, the patriarch, was a man consumed by his purpose, his hands clamped to the steering wheel, knuckles bone white, as if he could physically force their passage west. He was fleeing, they all were, from the suffocating familiarity of their small, stagnant hometown, towards the elusive promise of a new beginning, a blank slate under a different sky. Beside him, Sarah, his wife, clutched a dog-eared paperback, its pages unread for hours. Her gaze, usually lost in the fictional worlds within, now clung to the relentless blur of the passing landscape, searching for something, anything, to break the monotonous trance of the highway. In the back seat, their 2 children, 10-year-old Emily and 7-year-old Josh, squabbled softly over a tablet, their usual boisterous energy muted, subdued by the sheer, soul-numbing expanse of the journey. Liam had promised adventure, a grand American odyssey, but 3 days in, the romance had curdled into a simmering tension that clung to the car like the oppressive summer heat. They were deep in the heart of the American plains, a vast, indifferent canvas where the sky stretched endlessly, a dome of cerulean fading to a hazy white, and the asphalt shimmered like a distant, unattainable mirage. The initial thrill of departure, the hopeful chatter about new schools and new friends, had long since dissolved, replaced by the gnawing weariness of cramped limbs and recycled air. Liam, a man who prided himself on meticulous planning, had made a last-minute, impulsive decision, a scenic shortcut. He'd unearthed a faded, brittle paper map from his father's dusty garage, its creases worn thin, its ink bleeding in places. "It'll cut off a few hours," he declared with a forced cheerfulness that none of them truly believed, a desperate attempt to inject some much-needed efficiency into their increasingly arduous trek. The shortcut had begun innocently enough. A narrow, 2-lane highway, initially paved, snaked through endless fields of golden wheat, their stalks swaying in unison like a vast, silent ocean. The late afternoon sun, a benevolent orb, cast long, dancing shadows, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. Emily, briefly distracted from her tablet, had pointed out a distant farmhouse, a tiny speck against the vastness. "Look, Mom, a real farm." But as the sun dipped below the horizon, bleeding its last light into the darkening sky, the road began to subtly, unnervingly change. The asphalt grew rougher, pockmarked with cracks that rattled the car's aging suspension, each jolt a fresh reminder of their deviation from the smooth, predictable interstate. The golden wheat fields, once comforting in their uniformity, gave way to dense, dark forests, their trees looming like skeletal fingers, their branches intricately interwoven, forming an impenetrable barrier against the encroaching twilight. The air, once open and breezy, grew thick, heavy, carrying a faint, earthy scent that was not unpleasant, but alien. "Are we sure this is right, Liam?" Sarah asked, her voice tight, a thin thread of anxiety woven into her tone. She had finally abandoned her book, her gaze now fixed, almost desperately, on the encroaching shadows that swallowed the road ahead. "The GPS has been out for ages, and this doesn't look like any state road I've ever seen." Liam glanced at the ancient map, then back at the winding, increasingly desolate track, his brow furrowed in a deepening crease. He traced a finger along the faded line. "It should be, just a bit further, honey." It said it was a well-maintained state road. "Maybe it's just a bit rustic out here." He tried to sound confident, but a tremor in his voice betrayed him. The map, he realized, was far older than he'd initially thought, perhaps from a time before GPS, before even reliable road maintenance. But it wasn't rustic. It wasn't even a state road anymore. The well-maintained state road had devolved into a gravel track, barely wide enough for their sedan, with overgrown bushes and thorny branches scraping relentlessly against the car's paintwork, a grating, unsettling sound that set their teeth on edge. The GPS, which had been spotty for hours, now displayed a blank, mocking screen, a faint, taunting no-signal message glowing like a malevolent eye. They were truly, utterly lost. "Daddy, I really need to go to the bathroom," Josh whined from the back, his voice small and reedy, laced with a desperate urgency. "Me too," Emily echoed, her face pressed against the window, trying to peer into the deepening gloom, her usual curiosity tinged with apprehension. Liam sighed, a long, weary exhalation, and pulled the car over to the side, the tires kicking up a thick cloud of dust that momentarily obscured the already fading light. "All right, quick. Both of you. Don't wander off. Stay close." The moment they stepped out of the car, an oppressive, almost suffocating silence descended. It wasn't the gentle quiet of a rural evening. It was a profound, unnatural stillness, a vacuum of sound. The air was heavy, thick, and strangely cold for a summer evening, carrying a faint metallic tang. The chirping of crickets, usually a comforting, ubiquitous backdrop to rural nights, was conspicuously, unsettlingly absent. All they heard was the faint, dry rustle of leaves in a non-existent breeze, and the frantic thrum of their own blood in their ears. Josh, clutching Liam's hand with a desperate grip, darted behind a thicket of gnarled pines, his small frame disappearing into the shadows. Emily, usually more adventurous, ventured a few tentative steps into the woods, her small flashlight beam cutting a fragile swathe through the impenetrable darkness. "It's really dark here," she whispered, her voice barely audible, swallowed by the vast silence. "And it feels weird." Sarah, meanwhile, felt an inexplicable, icy prickle on the back of her neck, a sensation of being watched that raised goosebumps on her arms. She scanned the tree line, her gaze darting from one twisted silhouette to another, a shiver running down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The trees seemed to lean in, their branches twisting into grotesque, almost predatory shapes, like gnarled, skeletal hands reaching out from the abyss. Every shadow seemed to shift, every rustle of leaves sounded like a deliberate movement. "All right, everyone back in," Liam called, his voice sharper than usual, a strained edge to his tone. He, too, felt the unsettling atmosphere, the growing sense of wrongness. The metallic taste in the air was stronger now, like old pennies left out in the rain, or something even more unsettling. He hurried the children back into the car, a desperate urgency in his movements. Back inside the sedan, the feeling of profound unease intensified, pressing in on them from all sides. Liam turned the key, and the engine sputtered to life with a reluctant cough, but the headlights seemed weaker, their beams barely piercing the inky blackness ahead, swallowed almost immediately by the dense forest. The gravel road, if it could still be called that, twisted and turned with malicious intent, each blind bend revealing only more of the same claustrophobic, suffocating forest, an endless tunnel of darkness. "I don't like this road, Daddy," Josh whimpered, burying his face in Sarah's side, his small body trembling. "It feels like it's going the wrong way." "It's okay, sweetie. We'll be out of here soon," Sarah murmured, stroking his hair, her voice a thin attempt at reassurance, though her own heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead, willing it to change, to open up, to reveal a familiar sign, a street lamp, anything. Hours passed, or so it seemed. Time had become a fluid, distorted thing, stretching and contracting in the oppressive darkness. The fuel gauge, which had been half full when they optimistically turned onto the shortcut, now hovered precariously close to empty, its needle trembling on the red line. Liam cursed under his breath, a low, desperate sound. "This is insane. We should have turned back. I should have listened to you, Sarah." "It's not your fault, Liam," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. The unspoken fear hung heavy between them. Suddenly, a faint, flickering glow appeared through a break in the trees, a distant, hopeful beacon in the overwhelming darkness. "There! A light!" Emily suddenly exclaimed, her voice thin but filled with a desperate, irrational surge of hope, pointing a trembling finger. Hope surged through them, a desperate, irrational wave, washing over their fear-addled minds. A town? A house? Anything? Sarah asked, leaning forward, her face pressed against the window. Liam pressed the accelerator, the old engine protesting with a series of hacking coughs. But he pushed it, desperate. The light grew stronger, resolving into a single bare bulb hanging precariously from what looked like a porch. Beneath it, a ramshackle building emerged from the shadows, an old, dilapidated motel. Its sign, half-rotted and leaning precariously, read, "The Last Stop Inn." The letters were faded, some missing entirely, making it look more like a warning, a dire prophecy, than an invitation. "Thank God," Liam breathed, the words a raw whisper of relief, as he pulled into the gravel parking lot. The place was utterly deserted. No other cars, no sound but the buzzing of the single, lonely light bulb and the faint, unsettling hum of their own fear. The air was still heavy, and the metallic taste was stronger now, almost acrid. "It looks abandoned," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper, a cold dread seeping into her bones. The windows were dark, some boarded up, and the paint peeled in long, ghostly strips. "It's the only thing for miles," Liam reasoned, trying to inject a note of confidence into his voice, though his hand still trembled on the steering wheel. "We can't keep driving on fumes. We'll just ask if they have a room or at least some gas. Even a phone to call for help." He got out of the car, the gravel crunching loudly under his feet, the sound amplified in the profound silence. The air was still heavy, and the metallic taste was stronger now, almost acrid. He walked towards the front door, a flimsy screen door hanging askew on a single, rusted hinge. He knocked, the sound echoing eerily in the stillness, swallowed by the vast, empty space. No answer. He knocked again, louder, a desperate plea for human contact. Suddenly, with a slow, agonizing groan, the door creaked open, revealing a sliver of impenetrable darkness within. A figure emerged, slowly, deliberately, into the dim, flickering light. It was an old woman, her face a roadmap of deep, ancient wrinkles, each line a testament to untold years. Her eyes, sunken deep within their sockets, were unervingly bright, glinting with an unsettling intelligence that seemed to pierce the darkness. She wore a faded, shapeless dress that hung loosely on her frail frame, and her sparse, wispy white hair was pulled back in a messy, haphazard bun. A faint, cloying scent, like dust and something else, something vaguely sweet and sickly, like decaying flowers or old, forgotten meat, emanated from her, filling the air. "Can I help you?" she rasped, her voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement, a sound that seemed to scrape against their very souls. Her head tilted, a gesture that was more bird-like than human. "Yes, ma'am," Liam said, trying to keep his voice steady, to project an air of normalcy he didn't feel. "We're a bit lost. My car's almost out of gas. Do you have any rooms available, or perhaps a gas pump? We just need to get back on the main road." The old woman's lips stretched into a thin, unsettling smile, revealing a few discolored, uneven teeth, like ancient tombstones. "Lost, are we? Many folk get lost on this road. It has a way of keeping what it finds." Her eyes, disturbingly bright, flickered past Liam, towards the car, lingering for a moment on the small, huddled forms of the children in the back seat. A predatory glint seemed to pass through them. "And yes, we have rooms. Plenty of rooms. Always room for more. And gas for those who need it, though it rarely helps them leave." A cold, heavy dread settled in Liam's stomach, a leaden weight that seemed to drag him down. He ignored the unsettling undertones in her voice, focusing only on the immediate need. "Just a room for the night, then. And if you could point us to the nearest gas station in the morning, we'd be grateful." "Nearest gas station is a fair piece," she said, her eyes still on the car, her smile unwavering. "A very fair piece indeed. But you're welcome to stay. Room 5. It's cozy. Very cozy. Many have found it so." She held out a large, heavy iron key, its teeth rusted and pitted, its handle cold and smooth from countless hands. Liam took the key, his fingers brushing against her cold, dry skin, which felt like parchment stretched over bone. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through him. "Thank you," he managed, his voice barely a whisper. He hurried back to the car, the key feeling impossibly heavy, a tangible weight of foreboding in his hand. "She's a bit odd," he muttered to Sarah, trying to make light of it, to dismiss the profound unease that had settled over him. "But at least we have a place to stay, just for the night." He avoided her gaze, knowing she saw the fear in his eyes. Room 5 was at the very end of the motel, tucked away behind a row of overgrown, skeletal bushes that clawed at the decaying wall. The door creaked open onto a single, sparsely furnished room, the air within even colder than outside, carrying the same sickly sweet, cloying scent that now seemed to permeate everything, seeping into their clothes, their hair, their very skin. A lumpy double bed, its mattress sagging in the middle, a small, chipped dresser, and a single dusty lamp comprised the entirety of the furniture. The thin, faded curtains hung limply, barely covering the grimy window. "It smells funny, Daddy," Josh complained, wrinkling his nose, his small face pale, like old flowers and something else. "Something bad." "Just old, sweetie," Sarah said, trying to reassure him, though she felt the same, a wave of nausea washing over her. She pulled back the thin, faded curtains. Outside, the darkness was absolute, a thick, impenetrable blanket that swallowed the meager light from the motel, making the world beyond seem to cease to exist. As they settled in, the silence of the room was abruptly broken by a strange, unsettling sound emanating from the walls, a faint, rhythmic scratching, like tiny claws dragging against plaster, or something even more disturbing, something trying to get out. "What's that?" Emily whispered, her eyes wide, darting nervously around the dim room. She clutched her mother's hand. Liam tapped the wall, a hollow thud. Probably just mice. Old building, but the sound seemed too deliberate, too rhythmic for mice. It pulsed, almost like a slow, steady heartbeat, a living thing trapped within the very structure of the motel. He tried to ignore it, but it wormed its way into his mind, a constant, unsettling presence. Sleep was impossible. The scratching continued, sometimes fading to a barely perceptible whisper, sometimes growing louder, more insistent, accompanied by what sounded like faint, disjointed whispers, just at the edge of hearing, like 100 voices murmuring secrets they weren't meant to understand. Sarah clung to Liam, both of them staring into the oppressive darkness of the room, their nerves frayed, every shadow seeming to shift and writhe. Emily and Josh, huddled together on the other side of the lumpy bed, whimpered occasionally, their small bodies trembling. Around 3 a.m., a new sound began, a low, mournful wailing, distant at first, a faint, sorrowful cry carried on the non-existent breeze, then growing closer, circling the motel, a chilling lament that seemed to seep into their very bones. It wasn't an animal. It was too human, too full of despair, of ancient, profound sorrow. It sounded like a soul in torment. "What is that?" Sarah gasped, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with terror. She pulled Josh tighter against her. Liam got up, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He crept to the window, peering through a gap in the grimy curtains. The wailing was directly outside now, a chilling, guttural lament that seemed to press against the glass. He saw nothing but deeper shadows and the twisted, predatory shapes of trees, their branches like grasping claws. Suddenly, the wailing stopped. An abrupt, terrifying silence followed, even more unsettling than the sounds that preceded it. Then, a single, sharp, deliberate rap on their door. Liam froze, his breath catching in his throat. Sarah clutched his arm, her nails digging into his skin, her eyes wide with unadulterated terror. Josh let out a terrified, strangled sob, burying his face in his mother's side. Another rap, louder this time, a heavy, resonant thud that seemed to vibrate through the entire room. Liam swallowed, his throat dry, his voice a shaky whisper. "Who's there?" he called out, the words barely escaping his lips. No answer, only the silence, thick and suffocating, pressing in on them, amplifying the frantic beat of their own hearts. He slowly, cautiously, approached the door, his hand hovering over the cold, rusted doorknob. He peered through the peephole, but it was too dark, too grimy to see anything but swirling blackness. He pressed his ear against the cold wood. Nothing. No breath, no movement, just the echoing silence. He backed away, his mind racing, a desperate, primal instinct screaming at him to flee. He had to get them out of here. This wasn't just an old, creepy motel. This was wrong. Deeply, fundamentally, terrifyingly wrong. "We're leaving," he declared, his voice firm, resolute, though his hands still trembled uncontrollably. "Right now. We can't stay here another minute." Sarah didn't argue. She scrambled to gather their meager belongings, her movements frantic, her eyes darting nervously towards the door. Emily and Josh were already pulling on their shoes, their faces pale, their small bodies rigid with fear. They slipped out of the room, the old woman's unsettling smile flashing in Liam's mind. A chilling premonition. The air outside was even colder, the darkness more profound, a tangible entity that seemed to press in on them. The single light bulb on the porch seemed to flicker erratically, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on their eyes, making the abandoned cars in the lot seem to shift and sway. As they reached their car, Liam fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped them onto the gravel. He jammed the key into the ignition, turned it with a desperate prayer. Nothing. A dead silence. He tried again. The engine coughed, sputtered once, a weak, dying gasp, then died again, leaving them in the profound, echoing silence. "No, no, no," he muttered, trying a third time, his desperation growing, turning into a frantic, clawing panic. Come on, you piece of junk." From the shadows near the motel entrance, a low, dry chuckle drifted towards them. It was the old woman. She stood by the motel entrance, a dark, skeletal silhouette against the flickering light, her eyes glowing faintly in the gloom, like embers in a dying fire. "Leaving so soon?" she rasped, her voice carrying clearly across the silent, empty lot, laced with a chilling amusement. "But you just got here, and the night is so long, so very, very long." A new sound joined her voice, a faint, rustling whisper that seemed to emanate from the trees themselves, growing louder, closer, surrounding them. It was like 1,000 dry leaves skittering across the ground, or something else, something scuttling, something with too many limbs, too many joints. Liam pounded the steering wheel in frustration, a raw, guttural cry. "The car won't start. It never does," the old woman said, her chuckle turning into a dry, hacking cough that sounded like bones rattling. "Not when they want you to stay, and they always want you to stay. Who wants us to stay?" Sarah cried out, her voice cracking with terror, her eyes darting frantically between the old woman and the encroaching darkness of the forest. The old woman simply smiled, a wide, terrifying grin that stretched her wrinkled face, revealing more of her discolored teeth. "The ones who live here, the ones who wait, the ones who hunger." From the depths of the forest, eyes began to appear, dozens, hundreds of pinpricks of light, glowing with an eerie, malevolent luminescence. They were not animal eyes. They were too large, too unervingly still, too filled with a cold, ancient malice. They were the eyes of something that had waited for a very long time. "Get back in the room," Liam yelled, his voice raw with fear, shoving the children towards the motel, towards the very place they had just fled. "Now! Move!" They stumbled back into room 5, slamming the door shut with a desperate thud, their breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. Liam frantically tried to lock it, but the old, rusted bolt was stiff, refusing to budge, as if mocking their futile efforts. The scratching in the walls resumed, louder now, more insistent, more frantic, as if whatever was inside was agitated, eager by their presence. The whispers grew clearer, forming disjointed, chilling phrases, a chorus of unseen voices. Join us, stay forever. Hungry, so hungry. The air grew colder, so cold that their breath plumed in front of them, visible in the dim light. The faint, sweet smell, like decay and something else, something metallic and cloying, filled the room, now overwhelmingly strong, making them gag. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the corner of the room, coalescing slowly, agonizingly, into a vaguely human shape. It was tall, impossibly gaunt, its limbs impossibly long and thin, stretching and contracting like smoke. Its face was a blur, a swirling vortex of impenetrable darkness, but its eyes glowed with the same malevolent light they had seen in the forest, twin points of burning malice. Emily screamed, a high, piercing sound that was abruptly cut short, stifled by the sudden, overwhelming terror. The shadow moved with impossible speed, a silent, terrifying blur, reaching for her. Liam lunged, pulling her behind him with a desperate cry, but the creature was too fast. Its shadowy hand passed through his arm, leaving an icy, burning sensation, a chill that seemed to penetrate to his very bone marrow. "What do you want?" Sarah shrieked, clutching Josh to her chest, her voice raw with terror and desperation. The creature made no sound, but the whispers in the walls intensified, forming a furious, eager chorus of hungry voices. The air crackled with a malevolent energy, a palpable pressure that seemed to squeeze the air from their lungs. More shadows began to emerge from the walls, from the floor, from the very air itself. They writhed and twisted, coalescing into grotesque, distorted figures, their forms shifting, their limbs elongating and contracting, their glowing eyes fixed on the family with an insatiable hunger. The room was filling with them, a silent, terrifying throng. Liam grabbed a heavy, rusted lamp from the dresser, its base solid and cold in his trembling hand, swinging it wildly, a desperate, futile gesture. But it passed harmlessly through the shadowy forms, doing no damage. They were incorporeal, yet their presence was overwhelmingly real, a suffocating weight that pressed down on them, stealing their breath, their hope. "Run!" Liam yelled, his voice a ragged scream, shoving Sarah and the children towards the door. "Just run. Don't look back." Sarah, numb with terror, her mind a whirlwind of fear and disbelief, dragged Josh and Emily towards the door, her movements frantic, clumsy. The old woman's face, a mask of chilling amusement, appeared in the grimy window, her lips moving in a silent, mocking laugh, her eyes burning with triumph. They burst out of the room, into the oppressive darkness of the motel corridor. The wailing resumed, closer now, echoing through the empty rooms, a symphony of torment. The scratching sounds followed them, emanating from every wall, every floorboard, every unseen crevice. "The car! We have to get to the car!" Sarah cried, pulling the children along, her legs burning, her lungs aching. But the parking lot was no longer empty. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of the shadowy figures now stood among the twisted trees, their glowing eyes fixed on them, forming a silent, menacing perimeter, a living cage of malevolence. Liam, bringing up the rear, felt a cold, impossibly strong hand close around his ankle. He stumbled, falling to his knees, his face slamming against the rough gravel. He looked back, a shadowy form, larger than the others, its eyes burning with an almost human intelligence, was pulling him back, its grip impossibly strong, dragging him towards the darkness of the woods. "Liam!" Sarah screamed, her voice a raw, guttural sound, tears streaming down her face, her heart tearing in two. "Go! Don't look back!" he yelled, struggling against the unseen force, his voice filled with a desperate, heartbreaking urgency. He saw the terror in Sarah's eyes, the desperate, agonizing need to help him, to pull him free, but he knew it was futile. "Take them. Go. Save yourselves." with a final, agonizing effort. A surge of adrenaline fueled by love, he pushed her forward, his hand pressing against her back. Sarah, sobbing uncontrollably, her vision blurred by tears, dragged the children towards the main road, the one they had come from, though it seemed miles away now, a distant memory of sanity. The last thing Liam saw was the old woman, standing on the porch, her smile impossibly wide, her eyes glittering with triumph, as the shadowy figures enveloped him, pulling him into the impenetrable darkness of the woods. His scream was abruptly cut short, swallowed by the rustling whispers and the mournful wailing. A final, despairing sound that would haunt Sarah's dreams for years to come. Sarah ran, her lungs burning, her legs aching, each step a desperate, agonizing effort. The terrified cries of her children, small, broken sounds of fear, spurred her on, lending her a strength she didn't know she possessed. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The sounds of the motel, the wailing, the whispers, the chilling echoes of Liam's final scream, faded behind them, replaced by the frantic pounding of her own heart and the ragged, desperate breaths of Emily and Josh. They ran for what felt like hours, through the oppressive darkness of the forest, stumbling over gnarled roots and sharp rocks, their clothes tearing, their skins scraped raw. The road was a faint, barely discernible track, a treacherous ribbon of earth, but it was their only hope, their only connection to a world that still made sense. The metallic taste of the air clung to her tongue, a constant, bitter reminder of the horror they had just escaped. Just as she thought her legs would give out, just as despair threatened to consume her, a faint glow appeared in the distance. Headlights. Real headlights. A beacon of hope in the overwhelming darkness. She screamed, a raw, desperate sound, waving her arms frantically, her voice hoarse. The car, a large, weathered pickup truck, slowed, its powerful engine rumbling, then pulled over, its bright lights illuminating their terrified faces. A man, burly and kind-faced, his eyes filled with concern, stepped out, his expression one of immediate alarm. "Are you all right? What in God's name happened?" he asked, his voice rough but surprisingly gentle, his gaze taking in their disheveled, terrified appearance. Sarah collapsed onto the dusty ground, gasping for breath, clutching her children to her, her body trembling uncontrollably. "The motel, the last stop in, we need help. They took him." The man's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. "The last stop in? You were there." He looked at her with a mixture of pity and a profound, ancient fear. He shook his head slowly, sadly. "No one goes to the last stop in. Not anymore. It ain't been open for 30 years. Not since the disappearances started. Folks just vanish." He glanced nervously at the dark, silent forest. "That road, it's known to lead folks astray. And that place, it feeds on them. It always has." Sarah stared at him, her mind reeling, struggling to comprehend his words. 30 years? But the old woman, Liam, couldn't be. Her reality fractured, twisted into something unrecognizable. "My husband," she choked out, her voice a raw whisper. "He's still there. They took him." The man shook his head again, a gesture of profound sorrow. "Ma'am, if your husband went into that place, he ain't coming out. No one ever does. Not from the inn." He helped them into his truck, his eyes scanning the dark woods with a wary, almost fearful glance, as if expecting the shadows to reach out and claim them. "That road, it's a hungry one." They drove in silence, the children huddled against Sarah, still trembling, their small faces pale and drawn. The truck driver, a local named Jed, eventually broke the silence, his voice low and solemn. He told them stories, whispered legends of the last stop-in of travelers who vanished without a trace, their cars found abandoned, their belongings untouched. He spoke of strange lights and mournful sounds in the night, of a malevolent presence that lured the lost to their doom, feeding on their fear, their despair. He spoke of the old woman, a caretaker of sorts, who had been there for generations, always the same, never aging, always waiting, a silent sentinel of the inn's dark purpose. Some say she's part of the inn itself, he murmured, his eyes fixed on the road. A piece of its hunger. Sarah looked back at the receding darkness, the forest a black, impenetrable wall against the faint starlight, swallowing the horrors they had just escaped. She knew, with a chilling, heartbreaking certainty, that Liam was gone, swallowed by the endless road, by the hungry shadows of the last stop inn, a permanent part of its malevolent tapestry. They reached a small, brightly lit diner at dawn, a jarring beacon of normalcy after the night's unspeakable horrors. The coffee was hot, scalding, and the food bland but comforting, a desperate attempt to ground themselves in reality. Sarah tried to explain to the local sheriff, a tired man with kind, weary eyes, but her words sounded hollow, unbelievable even to her own ears. The sheriff listened patiently, his expression conveying a polite skepticism, a practiced disbelief. "We'll send a patrol out, ma'am," he said, though his tone suggested it was a mere formality, a gesture of politeness. "But that road, it's a tricky one, and that old motel, it's just an abandoned ruin. Been that way for decades." He didn't mention the disappearances, the legends, the chilling whispers that permeated the local folklore. He didn't need to. His eyes held the same knowing sadness, the same weary acceptance, as the truck drivers. He knew. He just couldn't say it. Sarah knew they wouldn't find Liam. He was part of the inn now, part of the endless, hungry silence that had claimed so many before him. A ghost among ghosts. The journey continued, but it was a different journey. The car, a rental arranged by the sympathetic truck driver, felt empty, haunted by Liam's absence, by the phantom weight of his hand on the wheel. Sarah drove, her gaze fixed on the road, but her mind was miles away, replaying the terrifying events of that night. Every scream, every whisper, every chilling detail burned into her memory. Emily and Josh were quieter, their usual childhood laughter replaced by a somber, watchful silence. They clung to Sarah, their small hands seeking constant reassurance, their eyes wide with a fear that time would slowly, but never completely erase. The sun shone brightly, the landscape was vibrant, alive, but the world now seemed tinged with a permanent shadow, a dark filter over everything. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of the car, every distant, unfamiliar sound sent a jolt of fear through Sarah's heart, a visceral reminder of the lurking darkness. She saw Liam's face in the passing reflections on the window, heard his voice in the whisper of the wind, a constant, tormenting echo. They finally reached their destination, a new city that felt alien and overwhelming, its bustling streets and towering buildings a stark contrast to the desolate road they had traveled. The house they had rented was bright and spacious, filled with the promise of new beginnings, but it couldn't fill the gaping void Liam had left. Sarah tried to build a new life, to create a semblance of normalcy for her children. She got a job, enrolled them in school, painted the walls cheerful colors, trying desperately to banish the shadows. But the horror of the last stop inn lingered, a persistent whisper at the edges of her consciousness, a cold breath on her neck. Nights were the worst. The scratching sounds would return, faint at first, then growing louder, emanating from the walls of their new, safe home, a phantom echo of room 5. The mournful wailing would echo in her ears, a chilling reminder of the lost souls trapped on that endless road, a lullaby of despair. She would wake in a cold sweat, her heart pounding, convinced she could see the glowing eyes in the darkness, feel the icy touch of the shadows reaching for her. Emily and Josh, too, were profoundly affected. They had nightmares, screaming themselves awake, seeing the old woman's terrifying smile, feeling the cold, suffocating presence of the creatures. They drew disturbing pictures of shadowy figures and glowing eyes, their childhood innocence shattered, replaced by a deep-seated fear that no amount of therapy or reassurance could fully mend. They were survivors, but they were also scarred. Years passed. The acute pain of loss dulled. The raw edge of terror softened. The memories faded, dulled by the relentless passage of time, but never truly gone. Sarah remarried, found a kind, understanding man who helped her raise her children, who offered a gentle stability she desperately needed. But she never spoke of the last stop in, not to him, not to anyone. It was a secret, a dark stain on her past that she carried alone, a burden she felt she couldn't share. One crisp autumn afternoon, Emily, now a thoughtful, perceptive teenager, came to her, a strange, knowing look in her eyes. "Mom," she said, her voice hesitant, almost reverent. "I was looking at old maps online for a history project. There's a road. It's marked as abandoned now, completely unmaintained. But it used to be a state highway, and there's a place on it called The Last Stop and..." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning, a cold dread that seeped into her bones. She looked at her daughter, her heart sinking, a wave of nausea washing over her. Emily had found it. The past, like the shadows, had a way of finding them, no matter how far they ran. "It's just an old, abandoned place. Honey," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice even, trying to maintain the fragile facade of normalcy she had built. "Nothing to worry about." But Emily shook her head, her gaze unwavering.
"No."
"There are stories, Mom, online. Forums, old newspaper clippings. People who say they got lost on that road. People who say they saw things that weren't real. And some never came back." Her eyes, so uncannily like Liam's, were filled with a haunted knowing, a desperate, unspoken question. "Is that where Dad?" Sarah couldn't lie. Not anymore. The weight of the secret had become unbearable. She sat down on the sofa, pulling Emily close, and for the first time, she told the whole story, every terrifying detail, every chilling moment, every whisper and scream. As she spoke, she felt a strange, painful mix of agony and release. The crushing burden of the secret, carried for so long, began to lift, however slightly, like a heavy stone rolling off her chest. Emily listened, her face pale, her eyes wide, absorbing every word, every nuance of terror. When Sarah finished, a long, heavy silence hung between them, broken only by the sound of their breathing. "We have to go back," Emily said, her voice firm, resolute, a surprising strength in her tone. Sarah stared at her, horrified.
"No."
"Absolutely not. We are never going near that place again. It's too dangerous, Emily. You don't understand." "But Mom, what if there's a way to help him?" Emily pleaded, her voice filled with a desperate, irrational hope that mirrored Sarah's own secret, buried desires. "What if we can find out what happened? What if we can bring him back? Or at least give him peace?" Sarah wanted to scream, to rail against the madness of it. Bring him back? From that place? It was madness, a fool's errand that would only lead to more heartbreak, more terror. But as she looked into her daughter's determined eyes, she saw a reflection of Liam's stubborn courage, his unwavering spirit, and a faint, irrational spark of hope ignited within her. A dangerous ember in the ashes of her fear, a desperate need for closure. "We can't," Sarah whispered, but even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. The thought had been festering in her own mind for years, a dark, unspoken desire to understand, to confront the source of her nightmares, to perhaps, just perhaps, find some shred of peace. Josh, now a quiet, artistic young man, his sensitivity deepened by the trauma, overheard their conversation. He walked into the living room, his face serious, his eyes shadowed. "I'll go with you," he said, his voice surprisingly steady, a quiet resolve in his tone. "We have to know, for Dad, for us." And so, years later, the old sedan replaced by a sturdy, modern SUV, its GPS system meticulously updated, the three of them found themselves on the road again, heading east back towards the heart of their darkest nightmare. This time, they were armed not with naive optimism, but with research, with detailed maps, with a grim determination born of shared trauma and a desperate need for answers. They knew the risks, they knew the legends, but the pull of the unknown, the desperate need for answers, for closure, was stronger than their fear. They found the turnoff easily this time. The shortcut was now officially marked as unmaintained road, enter at your own risk. A stark, ominous warning. The asphalt quickly gave way to gravel, then to a dirt track, even more overgrown and treacherous than Sarah remembered. The path barely visible beneath a thick carpet of fallen leaves and tangled undergrowth. The trees loomed, darker, denser. Their branches intertwined overhead, forming a perpetual twilight, a tunnel of shadow. The GPS, once again, lost signal, its screen fading to the familiar, mocking no signal. The air grew cold, the metallic taste returned, stronger, more pungent, and the familiar, oppressive silence descended, wrapping around them like a shroud. "It's exactly as I remember it," Sarah whispered, her hands gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her voice barely audible over the crunch of tires. Emily, in the passenger seat, held a powerful, tactical flashlight, its beam cutting a sharp, unwavering swathe through the gloom, illuminating the twisted branches and shifting shadows. Josh, in the back, meticulously recorded their journey on a small, high-definition camera, his face grim, his eyes constantly scanning the dark, silent woods. They drove for what felt like an eternity, the silence punctuated only by the crunch of tires on gravel, the faint hum of the engine, and their own ragged, shallow breathing. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking menace, every distant sound a potential threat. Then, through a break in the trees, they saw it, the faint, flickering glow of a single bare light bulb, a malevolent eye in the darkness. The last stop in. It looked even more dilapidated, more sinister than Sarah remembered. The sign was barely legible, its letters almost completely faded, a ghostly whisper of its former warning. The building seemed to sag, as if collapsing under an unseen, immense weight, its roofline uneven, its walls buckling. The air was thick with the cloying, sweet scent of decay, now mixed with something else, something sharp and metallic, like old blood. "Stay in the car," Sarah ordered, her voice trembling, but firm. "I'm going alone. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, you drive away. Don't look back." "No, Mom," Emily said, her voice firm, resolute. She unbuckled her seatbelt. "We're in this together. All of us. We came this far." They approached the motel door, the same flimsy screen door, still hanging askew on its rusted hinge. The main door was ajar, revealing a gaping maw of impenetrable darkness within, a silent invitation to oblivion. The light bulb flickered, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and stretch, like hungry tendrils. "Hello," Sarah called out, her voice barely a whisper, a fragile sound swallowed by the profound silence that seemed to emanate from the inn itself. They stepped inside. The air was freezing, biting at their skin, the cloying scent overwhelming, making them gag. Dust motes danced in the faint, sickly light filtering through grimy, boarded-up windows, like tiny, lost souls. The lobby was a chaotic mess of overturned furniture, thick, ancient cobwebs, and a suffocating layer of grime, as if time itself had abandoned this place. "The scratching," Josh whispered, his voice barely audible, pointing a trembling finger to the walls. The faint, rhythmic sound was there, a constant, unsettling presence, as if something was trapped within the very fabric of the building, trying desperately to get out. They walked down the corridor, their footsteps echoing eerily in the oppressive silence, each sound amplified, distorted. Each door they passed was identical, each room shrouded in impenetrable darkness, a silent testament to forgotten horrors. They reached room 5. The door was still ajar, as if waiting for them, a silent, malevolent invitation. Sarah pushed it open. The room was exactly as she remembered it, the lumpy bed, its mattress stained, the chipped dresser, the single dusty lamp. But something was different. On the wall, where Liam had once tapped, a faint, dark stain had appeared, spreading like a sinister bloom, seeping from within the plaster, a mark of corruption. And on the bed, neatly folded, as if placed there deliberately, was Liam's old, faded baseball cap, the one he always wore. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, a strangled sob escaping her lips. She reached for it, her fingers trembling, her heart pounding. It was real. It was his, a tangible piece of the man she had lost. As she touched the cap, a wave of profound sadness and overwhelming fear washing over her. The scratching intensified, growing into a frantic, desperate scrabbling, a furious, clawing sound. The whispers began, louder this time, a cacophony of disjointed, chilling voices, swirling around them, pressing in from all sides. "He's here, join us. Stay forever hungry, so hungry. He's here," Emily whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and a desperate, fragile hope. "He's still here, Mom." Suddenly, the room plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. The single light bulb outside flickered and died, plunging the entire motel into an inky blackness. A chilling gust of wind swept through the room, carrying with it the sickly sweet scent, now overwhelmingly strong, cloying like a shroud of death. From the corners of the room, from the very air itself, shadows began to coalesce, forming familiar, gaunt shapes with glowing eyes. They writhed and twisted, their forms indistinct, yet undeniably there, pressing in. They were here, the creatures. "Run!" Sarah screamed, her voice raw with terror, shoving her children towards the door, a desperate, primal instinct. But the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, a final, resounding thud that echoed through the room, trapping them inside. The whispers grew into a furious roar, a chorus of hungry, eager voices, surrounding them, overwhelming them. The shadowy figures advanced, their glowing eyes fixed on them with an insatiable, ancient hunger. "What do you want?" Josh cried, his voice breaking, tears streaming down his face. "Leave us alone." One of the shadows, larger than the others, detached itself from the wall, its form solidifying, resolving into a grotesque parody of a human. Its limbs were impossibly long, impossibly thin, its head tilted at an unnatural, disturbing angle. Its face was still a blur, a swirling vortex of darkness, but the glowing eyes were unmistakable, burning with a cold, malevolent intelligence. It reached out a long, skeletal hand towards Sarah, its fingers elongating, twisting. "No!" Emily shrieked, stepping in front of her mother, her small body a shield. The creature paused, its glowing eyes fixed on Emily, a flicker of something akin to surprise, or perhaps calculation, passing through them. Then, a new voice, distinct from the cacophony of whispers, echoed in the room. It was faint, distorted, as if coming from a great distance, but unmistakably Liam's. "Run, my girls! Run! Get out!" The shadowy figure before them recoiled slightly, as if struck by an unseen force. The other shadows hesitated, their whispers momentarily silenced, a ripple of confusion passing through their ranks. "Dad!" Emily whispered, her voice filled with a desperate, fragile hope, a plea to the darkness. The creature before them seemed to writhe, its form flickering, its shadowy outline wavering. The whispers resumed, but now they were laced with anger, with a desperate urgency, a frustrated chorus. "He fights, he resists, he will join, he will be ours." Liam's voice, stronger now, though still distorted, cut through the din, a desperate, defiant cry. "Don't let them take you. The light, find the light." Sarah understood, a sudden, blinding clarity. Liam was still here, trapped within the inn, fighting against whatever malevolent force held him, his spirit refusing to yield. He was trying to protect them, even from beyond the veil, even as he suffered. She remembered the old woman's words, and gas, for those who need it. Gas, fuel, light. The single, bare light bulb on the porch, the one that had drawn them in. It was a lure, a trap, but perhaps also a weakness, a vulnerability. "The generator!" Sarah yelled, her voice hoarse, a sudden surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. There has to be a generator. That's how the light works. It's the only way. She remembered seeing a small, dilapidated shed behind the motel when they pulled in, a forgotten structure hidden by overgrown bushes. A desperate, frantic plan formed in her mind, a fragile thread of hope in the overwhelming darkness. Josh, Emily, stay together. Follow me. Move. She grabbed a heavy, rusted fire extinguisher from the wall, its weight surprisingly comforting, a solid object in a world of shadows. She smashed it against the door, again and again, with all her might, the old wood splintering and groaning under the assault, until the lock finally gave way with a sharp crack. They burst out into the corridor, the shadowy figures swirling behind them, their whispers growing into a furious roar, a sound of frustrated malice. The wailing resumed, closer, more desperate, as if the inn itself was screaming in rage. The scratching sounds followed them, emanating from every wall, every floorboard, every unseen crevice. They ran through the lobby, past the overturned furniture, the thick cobwebs, towards the back door. The air was thick with the cloying scent, the cold biting at their skin, but a new scent was emerging, the faint, metallic tang of ozone, of raw power. As they reached the back door, a shadowy figure materialized in front of them, larger than any they had seen, its glowing eyes burning with an intense, malevolent hatred, blocking their escape. Its form was more defined, more substantial, a towering silhouette of pure malice. "You will stay," a voice hissed, not a whisper, but a cold, ancient voice that seemed to emanate from the very air, from the depths of the inn itself. "You will join us, forever." Sarah didn't hesitate. She swung the fire extinguisher with all her might, a desperate, primal scream tearing from her throat, aiming for the glowing eyes. The extinguisher passed through the shadowy form, but as it did, a strange, high-pitched shriek echoed through the motel, a sound of pure agony, of something being torn. The shadow flickered, momentarily recoiling, its form wavering, its light dimming. "Now!" Sarah yelled, pushing the door open with a surge of strength. They spilled out into the overgrown backyard, the darkness absolute, but the air felt slightly less heavy. Sarah fumbled for her phone, turning on the flashlight. Its weak beam cut through the gloom, revealing the outline of a small, rusted shed, almost swallowed by the overgrown weeds. "There!" she cried, pulling the children towards it, her voice raw. The shed door was stuck, rusted shut, refusing to budge. Liam pounded on it, his heart pounding, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The wailing was directly behind them now, accompanied by the rustling, scuttling sound of the shadows, growing closer, surrounding the shed. "Help me!" she gasped, pulling at the door with desperate strength. Emily and Josh threw their small bodies against it, pushing with all their might. With a groan of tortured metal, a final, agonizing shriek, the door finally gave way, revealing a small, cramped space within. The air was thick with the smell of old oil and dust. In the corner, a dusty, old generator sat, a relic of a forgotten time. Sarah fumbled with the controls, her fingers numb with cold and fear. She found the pull cord, yanked it with all her strength. Nothing. The engine remained stubbornly silent. She tried again, harder, her muscles screaming in protest. The engine coughed, sputtered once, a weak, dying sound, then died again. The shadows were closer now, their glowing eyes visible at the edge of the shed, their forms pressing in, surrounding them. The wailing was deafening, a chorus of tormented souls, a symphony of despair. "It's not working," Josh cried, tears streaming down his face, his voice a desperate sob. "We're trapped." "It has to," Sarah screamed, yanking the cord again, her muscles screaming in protest, her body trembling with exhaustion and terror. "It has to work." Suddenly, a faint, flickering light appeared inside the shed. It wasn't from the generator. It was from a small, battered lantern hanging on the wall, its wick barely glowing, a forgotten relic. The lantern! Emily yelled, pointing a trembling finger. "Mom! The lantern!" Sarah grabbed it, her fingers brushing against the cold glass, the metal casing. She held it up, its weak light pushing back the encroaching shadows, but only barely, a fragile shield against the overwhelming darkness. The fuel! She realized, a sudden flash of insight. It needs fuel. That jerry can. She looked around the shed, her eyes darting frantically. In a dusty corner, half hidden by old tools, she saw a small, rusted jerry can. She grabbed it, her heart leaping with a desperate, irrational hope. She poured the gasoline into the generator, her hands shaking so badly she spilled some onto the dusty floor. The sharp, acrid fumes filled the small shed, mixing with the cloying, sweet scent of the inn. A volatile, desperate cocktail. "Stand back!" she yelled, pulling the cord one last time, a silent prayer on her lips. With a roar, a triumphant, deafening roar, the generator sputtered to life, its engine coughing and groaning, but producing a steady, powerful hum. The single light bulb on the porch of the motel flickered, then blazed to life, casting a harsh, blinding light across the parking lot, pushing back the shadows. More lights flickered on inside the motel, a sudden, jarring illumination. The moment the light hit them, the shadowy figures recoiled, hissing and shrieking, their forms flickering, dissolving like smoke. The wailing intensified, a sound of pure agony, of something ancient and malevolent being burned away. The metallic taste in the air lessened, replaced by the sharp, clean smell of ozone and gasoline, a scent of victory. "It's the light," Emily cried, her face illuminated by the harsh, triumphant glow, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. "They don't like the light." Sarah grabbed the lantern, its flame now burning brighter, its light a weapon, and ran towards the motel entrance, the children close behind her, their fear replaced by a desperate, exhilarating surge of courage. The shadows writhed and twisted, trying to block their path, but they seemed weaker, less substantial in the harsh light, their power diminished. They reached the front door, the old woman standing on the porch, her face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Her eyes, no longer glowing, were dark and sunken, filled with a desperate, dying malice. "You interfere!" she shrieked, her voice raw and guttural, ancient and filled with venom. "You will not escape. You will join them." Sarah raised the lantern, its light blazing, a purifying flame, and thrust it towards the old woman. The old woman screamed, a sound that was both human and something ancient, inhuman, a sound of utter defeat. Her skin seemed to crack and peel, revealing something dark and decaying beneath, a void of nothingness. She recoiled, stumbling back into the shadows of the motel, her form dissolving into a cloud of dust and ashes, a final, chilling whisper of a curse fading into the newly lit air. The wailing inside the motel reached a crescendo, a final, agonizing shriek, then abruptly ceased. The scratching sound stopped. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by the warmth of the generator. The cloying scent dissipated, leaving only the smell of dust and old wood. Silence. A true silence this time, not the suffocating silence of the inn, but the peaceful, blessed silence of a quiet night, of a battle won. Sarah, Emily, and Josh stood panting, their bodies trembling, but a strange, profound sense of calm settled over them. The motel, bathed in the harsh, unforgiving light of the generator, looked simply old. They walked back to their SUV, the engine starting without a hitch this time, a smooth, comforting hum. As they drove away, the last stop in receded into the darkness, a mere ruin on a forgotten road, its malevolence stripped bare by the light. But they knew what it truly was, a place of hungry shadows, of lost souls, of an endless road that led to nowhere but despair. And they had escaped. They never went back, but the experience had changed them forever. Sarah carried the scars of that night, the echoes of terror, but also a newfound strength, a fierce protectiveness for her children. a resilience forged in fire. Emily and Josh, though still haunted by nightmares that would occasionally resurface, grew into resilient, compassionate adults. Their bond forged in the crucible of shared terror, their understanding of the world deeper, darker, but ultimately more profound. And sometimes, on quiet nights, when the wind whispered through the trees, Sarah would swear she heard Liam's voice, faint and distorted, carried on the breeze. "Run, my girls, run," a warning, a farewell, and a promise that even in the deepest darkness, even on the most endless road, love could cast a light, a beacon against the shadows. Epilogue. Years turned into decades, stretching out like the vast, indifferent plains they once traversed. The new city became home, its vibrant rhythm slowly, gradually, soothing the deep wounds left by the last stop in, yet never fully erasing them. Sarah, now a woman with silver threaded through her once golden brown hair, her laugh lines a testament to quiet joys found after profound sorrow, would often sit on her porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and violet. It was a peaceful scene that belied the lingering shadow of her past. She had indeed built a good life, a full life, finding a quiet, steadfast companionship with Mark, the kind man she'd married years later. He was a rock, solid and understanding, accepting her silences and the occasional, unexplainable tremors that would ripple through her, even in the brightest daylight. She never fully articulated the horrors of the inn to him, not in explicit detail, but he understood the deep, unspoken grief, the missing piece of her heart. Their love was gentle, built on shared moments of warmth and the quiet strength of acceptance. Professionally, Sarah found purpose in advocating for families navigating unexpected tragedies, drawing on her own deep well of empathy to guide others through their darkest hours. She became a pillar of quiet strength, her resilience forged in the fire of that terrifying night. The nightmares, once a nightly torment, softened over time, becoming less frequent, less vivid, eventually fading to a low hum of unease that she learned to live with, like an old, familiar scar. She had learned to distinguish the phantom scratching from the real creaks of her comfortable home, and the distant wailing from the lonely cry of a distant train. Emily, a woman who carried her father's intelligence and her mother's quiet determination, carved out a remarkable career as an architect. Her designs were almost obsessively focused on light, vast windows, airy open-plan spaces, and strategic use of reflective surfaces. Her buildings were sanctuaries, designed to flood every corner with natural illumination, a direct, deliberate counterpoint to the suffocating darkness of the last stop in. She specialized in public spaces, libraries, and community centers, places meant to foster connection and banish isolation. Though she rarely spoke of the inn, her philosophy was clear to anyone who understood the subtext of her work. Light was safety, light was life, and darkness was the great separator. Privately, Emily meticulously continued her research into the abandoned road, now a faint, almost mythical line on digital maps. She delved into obscure local histories, cryptic online forums, and academic papers on geographical anomalies and folklore, searching for patterns, for other victims, for any shred of empirical validation for what they had endured. She found whispers, tantalizing fragments of similar vanishings, of lost travelers and places that seemed to defy cartography. It was a lonely pursuit, a constant dance with the edge of belief, but it provided a strange comfort, a sense of not being utterly alone in her terrifying knowledge. She raised her 2 children, Liam Jr. and Clara, with a boundless love and a quiet, almost imperceptible vigilance. She taught them to be aware of their surroundings, to trust their instincts, and never, ever to take shortcuts through the unknown. She instilled in them a healthy respect for the wild places, for the old stories, not as mere tales, but as echoes of something real. Josh, the sensitive boy who sought comfort in art, grew into a renowned photographer, his lens drawn to the liminal spaces of the world, abandoned structures, forgotten towns, and the stark beauty of remote, untouched landscapes. His most powerful works, those that garnered critical acclaim and a haunting, almost cult following, were his Echoes series. These photographs, taken in desolate, often unidentifiable locations, were imbued with a profound sense of unseen presence, of something just beyond the frame. A particular twisted tree, a shadowy doorway, a stretch of empty road shimmering under an indifferent sky, these images resonated deeply, stirring a primal unease in viewers who could not quite articulate why. Josh used his art not merely to depict, but to process his trauma, to give form to the formless terror that still lived within him. His artistic journey was a solitary one. He often traveled alone, drawn by a morbid curiosity, a need to confront the echoes of the last stop in other forgotten corners of the world. He sought places where the veil between worlds felt thin, not out of a death wish, but a desperate need for answers, for validation, for some tangible connection to the unknowable fate of his father. He never found another inn, but he felt its presence in the quiet rustle of leaves, the sudden drop in temperature in a forgotten building, the unsettling silence of certain empty spaces. He eventually found love with a fellow artist, someone who understood his profound melancholy and the unspoken depths of his inspiration. She learned to read the shadows in his eyes, accepting that part of him would forever be wandering that endless road. The last stop in itself remained. Locals, for generations, continued to weave its tale into hushed campfire stories, a cautionary legend passed down from parent to child. The road leading to it remained unmaintained, eventually overgrown completely, a testament to the community's unspoken agreement to leave the old terrors undisturbed. Travelers who strayed too far, relying solely on outdated GPS systems or simple curiosity, occasionally reported strange phenomena, inexplicable car troubles, sudden shifts in weather, a pervasive sense of dread, but none, it seemed, ever managed to reach the inn itself after that night. The light had worked. The generator, a monument to their desperate triumph, had kept the darkness at bay, burning away the malevolence that had clung to the physical structure. The inn now stood as a mere ruin, its power broken, its hunger starved, but its history, its scar on the landscape of reality, remained. The family remained tightly bound by their shared secret. They didn't have an annual ritual, no grim pilgrimage, but every year, on the anniversary of that fateful night, a quiet understanding passed between them. A knowing glance, a shared meal, a moment of profound, wordless connection. They had faced true horror, confronted the incomprehensible, and emerged. It had irrevocably shaped their perception of the world, fostering a deep distrust of simplistic explanations and an acute awareness of the fragile membrane separating the mundane from the monstrous. Yet, it also instilled in them an extraordinary appreciation for the ordinary, for warmth, for laughter, for the simple, precious act of being together in a well-lit room. Liam's absence was not forgotten, but it was accepted. He was not a ghost to be feared, but a part of their story, a silent guardian, a reminder of the love that had defied the darkness. And Sarah, now with more years behind her than ahead, would still, on rare, moonlit nights, drift into that familiar dream. The endless road would stretch before her, the old sedan groaning. But as the shadows began to gather, a light, softer than the generator's harsh blaze, would bloom from within the car, a gentle golden warmth emanating from the back seat, from the essence of her children, their spirits bright and unbreakable. And Liam's voice would come to her then, no longer distorted or fading, but clear and strong, right beside her, a comforting whisper in her ear. "You made it, my love. You brought them home." She would wake, not with a scream, but with tears and a quiet, profound sense of peace. The road was endless, but they had found their way home, and the light they carried within them would shine forever.